Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to another Clearwater Jazz Holiday Foundation's Young Lions Jazz Master Virtual Sessions. I'm going to be your guest host today, Michael Cernodal, and today's educator is Tyler Wertman, and the topic is Bebop and Blues, a trombone master class. It's going to be a special treat. I'm excited. I know you are too. Thank you for joining us. And I just want to remind you that we would love for you to ask questions during the session. Just go down there in that chat feature, type your questions, and we'll reserve some time at the end for our educator to answer anything. And don't forget, you can check out our sessions at www.clearwaterjazz.com/education. All these free sessions in our archives is awesome. You want to go check that out. And we love to hear your feedback on what we're doing. So email us at info@clearwaterjazz.com. So before we get started, of course, we want to thank our sponsors for our past sessions and everything that's going on with the education and outreach section. So for the studio archives, our sponsors are Blue Water Wealth Management at Stewart Partners and Duke Energy, as well as the Young Lion podcast available wherever you stream. And that's brought to you by our friends at Marine Max Clearwater. And just search Young Lions Jazz Master Virtual Sessions wherever you stream, you can find us. So our great educator today, Mr. Tyler Wertman, I want to tell you about his past sessions. Of course, you can go back in the archives and find that. And I would always have pen and pad and my instrument in my hand because he's always dropping so much knowledge. So he had a session called Basic Trombone Fundamentals, Long Tones, and Lip Slurs. What about this? Tonguing and articulation, major scale arpeggio practice. Those are all things that every instrumentalist need. Here was a good one, approaching a transcription. And we all know as jazz musicians how important that is. I love this one, chord progression and turnaround practice on the trombone and how to utilize a keyboard. So the list goes on and on. Before we move on, I just want to tell you a little bit about Tyler, and I'm going to get out the way. He is a jazz trombonist. You've already figured that out. And he's very special to the Clearwater Jazz Holiday Outreach Program, including our Young Lions Jazz Master Virtual Sessions and my journey with jazz programs. He's been involved with everything. He's a composer, performer, producer. He focused on jazz and classical styles. He performs with many groups and ensembles, which has taken him on many travels. And he's also the adjunct faculty professor at the music school, or Bauer School of Music at Florida Gulf Coast University. I bet you didn't know that. And there, he's a primary director of the FGCU basketball band, and he teaches the FGCU Student Brass Quartet, the Student Jazz Combo 2, private student instrumental lessons, and the assistant instructor for the FGCU Big Band. This is a very, very busy musician and educator. You figure that out. He's also, and there's more, he's an instructor of the music at University of Tampa, presently teaching Introduction to Jazz. Has his bachelor's degree in arts music from FSU and a master's of music and jazz studies from USF. We know that place close by. So welcome back, Tyler. The stage is all yours.
Mr. Cernodal, thank you so much. You do it like no other. Thank you. Again, it's always a pleasure to be here in front of these sessions and teach you guys, teach you something that I've learned along the way, and hopefully you guys pick up one or two things as well. So yeah, just like you said, we had a bit of prior history talking about everything from long tones and lip slurs, establishing your warm-up technique, onwards to chord progressions, okay, and turnarounds. And this is going to be something we're going to be diving into a little bit more today. Now, today's lesson, or lesson plan rather, is going to be discussing two essences in jazz that you really can't get around if you're very serious about this music. And those are the blues and bebop. Now, if you've been studying this music for a month or two, I'm sure you might have heard one of these terms. Okay, and if you are a professional of this music, rather, you know these two essences already. So with the blues, okay, so what is the blues? Well, the blues is actually a vocal form, right? So it's vocal inflections, right? It's these bends in the music. Now, we'll discuss more about what blues inflection is towards the middle of this lesson. Now, we also have bebop. Okay, now what is bebop? Now, with bebop, it's a more intricate way to describe the harmony in a soloistic manner, of course, but it's using more chromaticism. It's using more involved methods to describe chord harmony. Okay, and blues describes harmony as well. We're going to touch on both of those things later. Okay, but it's important to understand what those two things are, because you can't just go in thinking, okay, blues is just a lick that I heard, you know, XYZ musician play, and it's really bluesy. You know, I play that lick when I want to play the blues. Yes and no. Okay, we're going to talk about, again, why that might not be a good approach. So after establishing what these two art forms, you know, are and how they contribute to jazz, you know, you go on to its origins, right? Blues has a very, very, very extensive and regional history as well. If we listen to blues of just the Americas, okay, so we have Delta blues. We also have, you know, a Chicago style, Windy City blues. Okay, you have, you know, West Coast blues as well. In each of these, you know, blues forms, they vary just very slightly, but they contribute, or they were created in those regions, okay, that help identify the music with a particular area. Okay, now bebop was created in around 1930s, 1940s, okay, from the swing music that came before it. And then really musicians like Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, Miles Davis, then wanted to, or they were in search of greater harmony to play on top of these pre-existing chord changes or songs, okay? So there's its uses, or now we're going to be discussing its uses. That was its origins. Now with the blues, it's very common for students early on that they're told, hey, you know, learn this blues scale, okay? You can play this over anything. And that really isn't a great method or approach. Yes, it gets the students understanding and playing a blues scale, which in turn can get that sound in these players' ears, but they don't really go any further than that. It's never, hey, I want you to use a part of this blues scale, and only just a part, for you to be as creative as possible with use of this scale, instead of just learning to play that scale over and over and over again. Okay, so this is very, very important, because then you can start to, familiarize your own playing with a section of the scale, okay, or maybe a part of it that really communicates to you. Now, that's going to be very important when practicing, because your strengths and weaknesses are going to be different than someone else's strengths and weaknesses. So it's important to understand what you grasp onto quickly, how you grasp onto that information, how you practice, because this is what you want to do when you study bebop, when you study scales, when you study just everything in general. You want to practice things as efficiently as possible. Okay, so now with the blues, like I said, you can isolate part of the scale, make uses or multiple uses or phrases with just, one or two notes here. And so it becomes more of a a style rather than just a scale. Okay, so with bebop, it's in a very, very similar fashion. Okay, you really can't just learn a bebop scale and then, play a quote unquote bebop jazz. It doesn't really work like that. There's a lot of phrasing, just like in blues, that has to be understood before you can actually approach it correctly. And now with bebop, this involves, a lot of chromaticism, like I said before. So we have chromatic neighboring tones, okay, as well as just, regular neighboring tones, chromatic half steps that lead into our, desired chordal note or thirds or whatever. An example would be just going from a 1 to a third. Okay, so that would be like this, just standard on trombone. Now, if I were to play a bebop approach to that 1 to third, it might sound like this. And so all I did was combined the chromatic note under and the chromatic note above to get to our harmony. So on piano, hopefully you can hear all of those chromatic notes all around it. If you were to play it all together, it doesn't sound very good, okay? But when it's in time and when it's in a particular phrase, okay, you can make these chromatic notes work that might not be, assigned under the chord, okay, such as B flat major. We actually used a C sharp there or a D flat. In this case, I would think of it as a C sharp for a sharp 9 rather than a flat third, because then we enclose up to the third. Okay, so that's another way harmony can be viewed. Okay, just like if you're playing a blues scale. Okay, and if you're playing you could think of that as 1 to flat 3. You could also think of it as 1 to sharp 9. Okay, so it's really however you're interpreting those notes, those harmony lengths or values. Now, so those were the uses. To each player, you're going to find, a few key lines or key sounds, okay, that gravitate to you. And like I said, that's going to be very important for you to be more comfortable practicing these different styles down the road. Okay, and again, those two examples that I played, the bebop and the blues, are very, very basic examples and are examples that you can take and then grow to create more of your own personal exercises, lines, licks, phrases, etc. So it's important, though, to start at a very, very basic, simple starting point and then progress. Okay, so if you're practicing bebop, you're probably not just going to jump into giant steps and try to play, 3 courses of just perfect bebop over those, different 2/5s. A better approach might to play over rhythm changes, over a blues, over a form that might be a little bit more, less complicated, so to speak. And then from there, you can take your studies, okay, and make them more complicated on top of those simple beginnings, okay, or songs, chord patterns, chord progressions, okay. But it's beneficial to start as simple as possible. Make it hip. I'm not saying play something simple that stinks, okay. That's the challenge. How simple can you keep your music while still keeping that swing, still keeping that freshness, that human quality to this music, okay? That's the most important part. We're not robots. Nobody wants to hear robots play jazz, okay? Maybe that's a good thing. That's why we're still here. And if you don't believe me, go look up the video of the robot playing Giant Steps from John Coltrane. Man, he's playing the notes, or the robot's articulating the notes. It's not a him, right, or a her. But at the end of the day, which one would you rather listen to, right? It's not a matter of right and wrong. It's just that humanistic approach and quality that we attract to, that we gravitate towards. So it's important when you practice to take those things out of the music. Okay. And if you're not, maybe you should start thinking of what you're practicing in that light. And so this brings me to my last point here, is that these things, these essences, like I talked about, blues, bebop, they're not just licks, nor should they be treated as licks. That gets very, very dangerous. Okay. And like I said, you start to lose that understanding of what bebop is, of what blues is, and how these two, just these, there's so many more, different art forms found under jazz that there is to practice. But for today's discussion, this is what I'm limiting towards. With blues, it has such a rich history. Okay, all these artists, countless artists, bebop as well. Okay, and it's an understanding of both, and it's also a blend. Okay, that's why you shouldn't see them as licks either, because if you're done playing blues lick number 4 and it's time to play bebop lick number 5, that's, unless you wrote them so they go together perfectly, it's just not going to mesh very well. How are you going to, go through your phrases and connect your phrases? I'm sure you all have heard that line in the music, connecting phrases, playing longer phrases. Okay, now what is that? Well, it's not playing licks. It's not lengthening the, your best bebop lick to 4 more measures. It's actually taking some music and growing it. Okay, whether that growth is through, repetition, through, inversion, there's so many different ways that you could grow these phrases that does not involve creating new material. Okay, and that is a growth in itself, to create, okay, and to go. So now I'm going to sort of demonstrate this growth, this creation, and I'm also going to try to demonstrate just lick, just trying to play blues licks, bebop licks, and things like that, and try to show you a difference here. Okay, so with my demonstration, I'll play a blues play along. This will be in the key of B flat major. Okay, and so I'll take 2 courses, and so with these first 2 courses, I will demonstrate blues playing. So my first course, I'll try to demonstrate a player. It might be tough, who only, or learns from playing licks. Okay, maybe how that might limit their playing. And then the second course, I'll try to demonstrate a musician who uses, the blues scale to grow their phrasing within the natural solo. So let's do these 2 courses, and then we'll do bebop after. Okay, so here's B flat. Okay, so maybe that wasn't entirely fair, because maybe I don't understand, these incorrect, basic licks, but I tried to keep my first course as general, as possible. Maybe something you might hear, a a young high schooler, okay, playing with my second chorus, I demonstrated how the blues could be used through phrasing, okay, inversion, things like that. I think the first thing I played was that same 1, 2 sharp 9, okay, and then I inverted it down, okay, so instead of that 1, okay, at being my starting note, I inverted it to the 5. Okay, so that's literally taking that exact phrase and just inverting it, okay, putting it somewhere else, okay, and then from there you grew, okay, you expanded, and hopefully you could hear that growth within that process of just that one course, and to grow in one course, it's not the easiest thing to do, but it definitely requires an understanding of strong phrasing. Okay, and this is a great challenge that I encourage you all to do in your practice as well, in all 12 keys. Okay, and I'm just demonstrating B flat for the purposes of this video. Now, the same thing for bebop. Okay, we might learn 2 or 3 different bebop licks here, but it might not necessarily all gel together. It might feel a little, disjunct. So I'm going to try to demonstrate 2 more courses. First one being a more disjunct beginner approach. And the second one is going to be a more fluent beginning approach. Okay, so here we go. B flat again. And hopefully you heard some elements of not necessarily blues, but other forms of jazz in there as well. Okay, and that's the whole point of practicing on your own, is to find that level of understanding within your playing to a certain subject. Okay, these subjects being blues and jazz in this matter. So it's more than just licks, like I was saying. It's about developing comfort with each of these subjects, right? Blues, bebop, and other forms as well. Understanding its uses, okay? Understanding the origins, and just really relating all of those things to your own musical progress, okay? How can you, make the most use of blues and bebop in your playing and soloing? So, Mike, I think that's everything I had today.
Wow, that was a great session, Tyler. I really enjoyed that, and every little intricate part you had about even using the chromatics and the scales and really listening. I was thinking about the historical point where some people really did not like bebop when it came out, and maybe it was fear because some people just could not play it. And those musicians were so talented, and they knew it was on another level. And I remember there were some songs called Death to Bebop, when it was coming out of that era, from Louis Armstrong. Right, yeah. And could you imagine what was going on during that period where this was so different? Do you think it was because they couldn't understand the structure of it? Or, what do you think that was, or right now, a student that may hear you play that second line that you played, that second example, they're like, oh, I kind of got lost there. So when you're playing that, was it more of, you're thinking the theory aspect, or is that something more of you heard or a combination? Hopefully I didn't confuse you with that. I asked you like three questions at once.
You did. So let's see if I can start backwards and sort of help me out.
So let's talk about that historical standpoint first.
Sure. Let's start from the beginning there. So historical standpoint, absolutely. It's, and there were a lot of musicians that were dominant in the swing era that did not transfer over into this bebop era. Now, I do think partially it was, that understanding of, man, this music is tough. This is hard. This might not be as easy to get into. But personally, I believe that this is more of, from a musical standpoint, of a new music that we can't really dance to. And if you look at the popularity of jazz of that era, well, we couldn't really go out and throw on Netflix, right? So what were, the mass population doing? We were going out to these music venues, dancing, right? Enjoying the space with our movements too, with the swing music that was going on. Now we have an entirely new music that almost involves us not to do that. We have to sit down and listen and not move. I can imagine at this time a mass population of people not gravitating to this. Now, this can be, viewed today in a similar manner, right? We have our very, very focused jazz quartets and quintets, and then we have a more popular groups, right? And you know what I'm referring to here, but it's few and far between to what that music was back in its heyday. And I do believe that it was more of the sense that we can't dance to this bebop sensation that's now being innovated in this music. And I think it took a little bit longer for people to grab on. And like you said, we had Louis Armstrong, who never diverted from his true sense of jazz that he initially helped create, right? And that's cool. That's awesome. But people have to understand, Louis Armstrong didn't pass away in 1930 and then, or, whichever, and then, Miles Davis was born and then Louis Armstrong just stopped. No, Louis Armstrong continued to play through this creation, right? And through all of these different creations in jazz, the 40s, 50s, 60s, and on. But I think that's what makes it, at the end of the day, this whole, or this umbrella term of jazz can get a little bit misinterpreted. But no, bebop definitely did see a fall in the population following. And I think because of this, it was primarily because of dance.
Wow, that is a great point, because I think about, the era, from the Savoy and, Harlem with the swing dancers. This music makes you think. You have to sit and think about it. So that's a good point. Maybe it's because we couldn't just get up and dance and swing and things like that. That is an awesome point. Now, the second part of that question was about, when you played that second excerpt, which was more intricate than the first one, and they were both great. The first one is more simplistic. Second one was a little bit more, it had diverse sounds and, things going on with it. I think sometimes a student will hear that and say, that's hard. That sounds hard. So do you think a student will gravitate towards that easier if they understand the theory, or more listening, or it's going to take both?
I was going to say, yeah, you can never go wrong with both there. Again, listening and being informed. Okay, like I said, with my origin, right, of these two, is going to enhance your own understanding of bebop. And then by listening, okay, you start to hear some of these lines, some of these patterns, some of these notes, even over and over again. and you might find that one note, okay, that 13 to the sharp 11, and you love that sound. For me, that was me when I was going into my later years of grad school. That 13 to the sharp 11, man, I loved every bit, and I played it on the second go around. I played some of the material found on the secondary dominant. Okay, so instead of B flat major, I was soloing on C major. And so it's just, again, it is an understanding of theory, but it's almost, just as important to have that listening as well, to pair the theory to create that understanding within your own playing.
Great answer to that, Tyler. Well, I mean, this has been an awesome session, and I know it's one that you could rewind, take the notes, practice along, use those backing tracks, use those listening examples, definitely, look up Charlie Parker, look up Dizzy Gillespie, look at all of these artists, even some of these people that you may not have heard of during that bebop era, that you'll be very, very pleased if you look them up and do your research. So we thank you for this session today, Tyler. It's been a pleasure. And I just want to remind everyone that, if you enjoyed this session, you want to check out the up and coming free sessions. I want to stress it's free. So please take advantage of this. Go to our website, www.clearwaterjazz.com/education. And please, we want to hear your feedback. Email us over there at info@clearwaterjazz.com. And let us hear about all the great things, or if you have a topic you want to talk about, we'll love to hear about it. So until next time, thank you again, Tyler, and everybody keep swinging. I'm your guest host, Michael Canoto, and have an awesome, awesome day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mike.
All right, thank you.